to Cassette Connection, the podcast where we discuss music and meaning with the people who make it. My name is Ben, and with me is Alex.
This episode, Ben talks to alt folk singer Hedy Blaazer. Hedy is a guitarist, singer-songwriter who fronts the Hedy Blaazer duo. She has toured throughout the country in support of her independent releases and continues to write and record new music.
Hedy and I talk about her musical education and dive into the reasons why she decided to create folk music. We talk about her aesthetic choices for her music and discuss the reasons behind choosing to play as a duo. We also talk about her plans to expand her sound in the future. We talk all things independent music, as well as her songwriting process, basically from start to finish. It was a great conversation.
Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Hedy Blaazer. I'm an alternative folk artist based in Sydney and originally from Canberra. And live I play the double bass player called Will and a fiddle player called Marcella.
I'm staring at the pieces, I don't know just where they fit. I try to look for the horizon.
I've been playing music for as long as I can remember. I started out when I was a kid doing piano lessons, classical, which I never really liked that much, but I always kind of stuck with them. And then eventually I was in like grade, I want to say 7 or 8 of high school, and I borrowed this guy's really, really shitty like nylon string guitar, which actually had like a big hole in the top of it because a bass had fallen on it previously. And I borrowed that guitar and I just like started teaching myself guitar and like got other people at the school who knew how to play guitar to teach me little bits. And then I kind of just moved on to like teaching myself on YouTube and teaching myself, you know, on guitar tabs and everything. Until then I started to have more formal lessons. Then I think because, you know, with music generally you go, if you want to do like a formal education, you go into either classical or jazz. So I'd been doing mostly contemporary stuff. So I moved into jazz and I started the Type 1 program, which is like year 11 and 12, you do like kind of university studies. So I did that in jazz guitar. Then I moved to VCA in Melbourne, where I did about a semester. Didn't really love it, so I left and I went back to the ANU and finished my Bachelor of Music there, mostly doing jazz and kind of contemporary stuff. Throughout my uni, I started playing in a hip-hop band called Beneath Bonetta, and that's kind of like a live jazz soul hip-hop thing. And that was really, really fun. It was a real collaboration too, because there were lots of different kind of approaches in the one band, which was great. And then I kind of towards the end of my undergrad was when I really started to get into my own solo stuff. I've always loved folk. It's been like my favorite genre by a long way. But I've also, I guess, been influenced by a lot of the other stuff that I've learned along the way. And so that's what I try to do with Hedy Blaazer. Like it's mostly folk, but then I bring in a lot of other influences that I have. I also met Marcella at uni, at ANU towards the end. And that's when we really started playing together and everything started kicking off. Then I moved to Sydney and I've just been gigging as much as I can, playing. I've just really recently added a double bass player to the lineup and that's going really well. And yeah, we're just recording, writing and playing as much as we can.
The edge, it seems so far. I lose my patience. I return to this old chair and my guitar because last night was getting cold. All my friends had all gone home. I'm momentarily.
I never really loved jazz, I'll be honest. I've grown to have an appreciation of jazz as I've started to study it. But the reason that I did jazz was it was always kind of presented to me as, if you want to study at uni, you're going to have to either base yourself in jazz or classical. And, you know, I've always liked the concept of improvisation. And so I kind of went more into jazz. And also, like with classical, you need to have had, you know, years and years of training since you were a child to kind of have I guess the skill to get in. So I didn't really have the knowledge of classical guitar. So it was always jazz, more out of necessity than out of passion. But I think the thing that I really liked about jazz and really grew to like about jazz was kind of the improvisational nature. And also there's a lot of like boundary pushing within jazz. I love how you've got, especially kind of in older jazz music, less modern stuff, you've got a really strong melodic head that you're going to always kind of come back to in the performance. But then you're going to play around with that a lot, and you're going to have a lot of room for solos and a very kind of open relationship to the piece. So you'll take the piece, you'll perform it, and it'll be different every single time. And I really liked that, even though I guess jazz to my ear isn't really something that I've ever wanted to perform and, you know, make my career performing. It's given me kind of a lot of foundations which I've taken into the folk music that I play.
Friends had all gone home, I'm momentarily disrupted by the ringtone on my phone.
Going from performing with a hip hop group and then branching out and doing your solo work as a singer-songwriter folk artist, where's that? How do you kind of rationalize that difference?
Oh, look, it's so different. I guess I really like hip hop music. Like, it's a genre that I love. I love that kind of like neo soul hip hop stuff. I also love where jazz meets hip hop. Like, I think there's some really cool stuff there. And so, to be honest, they're completely different. Like, I wish I could give you some like cool answer about like how what I did in Beneath Bonetta is connected to the Hedy Blaazer stuff. It's really not. They're completely different things, unfortunately. But I guess there's just those kind of two sides of me. And even now when I'm playing a lot of folk, I do miss hip hop, and I'm probably listening to so much more hip hop than somebody who is, you know, a singer-songwriter folk artist would normally listen to. I just also like, I guess with hip hop, I feel like it's one of the only genres where even in the mainstream, you've got real kind of boundary pushing and like a little bit of experimentation. You know, if you look at kind of even just really mainstream folk, mainstream pop, you know, it's even like mainstream kind of, you know, hardcore music. It's very formulaic. It's very like, you know what you're going to hear. A lot of the songs sound very similar. You can really kind of predict it. Whereas I feel like with hip hop, you've still got that like spirit of improvisation and experimentation, even in the really mainstream stuff, which I love. So I think that's just, yeah, I guess they're two loves. They're not really connected in any way. So yeah.
Cool, but you know what they say, you fooled me twice now, so maybe I'm a fool and I wrote a song.
I love collaborating with people, and I think, you know, at least in Beneath Bonetta, we all had such different kind of outlooks on music. It's a really cool opportunity to combine those things into something that I know that I could never produce by myself. Like I would never be a hip hop artist with my skill set and, you know, my life experience and everything. But I feel like, you know, having that opportunity to collaborate with people who came from that perspective, even with my kind of more folky roots, it was really cool to see what that produced.
And I'm staring at the pieces I didn't know just where they fit. I try to rearrange them slightly, try to squeeze them just a bit better shape.
You know, Hedy Blaazer live has always just been me and Marcella on the violin. And it's given us this kind of freedom and this openness, which is really cool on stage. And I know that if I just sing a line and I want to phrase it a bit differently, or even if I just want to like add a little bit of a bar to something, or, either accidentally or deliberately play a little bit out of time, or, something like that. There's that freedom when you've just got two instruments. I love the violin. For me, violin was like the non-negotiable instrument that I knew that I always wanted to play live with. But then I've also really struggled because traditionally, I guess if you wanted a band set up, you'd add, bass and drums. And I have done that in my recorded music, as you mentioned. But with the recording, it's kind of like I love the power that drums bring, but live, I do kind of feel almost a little bit restricted rhythmically when you've got drums. It gives you a real power, and it's really great for getting through a room. But at the moment, I'm honestly really, really struggling with that. So I think at this point, it's going to be much more drums will be in my recorded music to kind of give it that oomph and get it across a bit more. I think, it's bass and violin at the moment are working really, really well together. I love the bowed strings. I love how they kind of contrast with electric guitar, especially. So for the time being, we'll see how that goes. But really, at the moment, my approach is with recordings, I think about each song and I think about ideally exactly what I would add to it and try to add that. Whereas with live recordings, I'm much more like live performance, I'm much more kind of like what will work and what will kind of be able to work in all contexts and work with the way I play.
Honestly, do you even talk to
I'd never want to try to imitate live performance in a recording. I think they're just such different things that I'm kind of okay with my recordings being quite different to what you hear live. So that's something that I've always embraced, and I'm happy to go with.
see your eyes drift around, you're trying to find a better place to be. And honestly, I'm bored, 'cause we've both been here before, and I don't wanna be.
I know that you've done some of your work as completely DIY, and you do the recording, do the producing, mixing, and then put the music out. But how do you find that difference between going into the studio working with someone else and then deciding to maybe record the piece on your own?
Yeah. It's another kind of conflict, I would say. I really like self-recording because of the creative control that you have. And you can just completely see things in whichever way you want to see them, and, go back and re-record something months after you've recorded it. And I used to find recording in a studio really intimidating. Obviously, it's expensive, and I don't have a lot of money. And obviously, I'm an independent artist. So that was the main thing stopping me. But then when I did save up money and go into the studio or get an opportunity, like I've had a couple of opportunities where I've been able to, win reduced studio time or get a grant or something like that. And the times that I've done that, I felt heaps of pressure in the studio because it's like you have a clock, it's running, you have to get it right on that day. And also just kind of music is such a personal thing. Letting someone else who's not normally in the band kind of give their opinion and, I guess tell you when, they think a take is good or something like that. It's quite a daunting experience. I now have kind of reached the perfect compromise because the main problem with self-recording is I'm not that good at it. My gear isn't that good. And honestly, it just never sounds that professional. Sometimes I've kind of leaned into the DIY thing. Like I released this cassette tape that was literally, it was unmastered and I'd done the mixing and, I knew it was a bit dodgy. I lived above a restaurant at the time and you could hear like K-pop coming up through the restaurant speakers underneath my house. And I was like, no, I'm just going to embrace it. Like this is what it is. And that was really rewarding. But obviously if you want to kind of get your music to a wide range of audiences and hope that it's going to get a little bit of radio play and stuff like that, no one's really going to play your self-recorded piece, which you've recorded above a restaurant. In my case, I'm just not good enough. Some artists are so good at self-recording. I'm just kind of like, don't have the skills and the equipment. So eventually I've kind of reached this compromise. Actually this year, because of COVID, we haven't been playing any shows really. And so we've really been focusing on recording and getting an EP together, which we're currently working on. And I've kind of married the two together because what I've been doing is meticulously self-recording demos to like the best of my ability, like as if they're going to be the finished product. And then I've been taking those demos to this studio that I've been working at and basically playing the demo to the engineer and being like, this is what I want it to sound like. And then recording it piece by piece back to that demo to make it sound like a more professional version of that piece that I've already put together. And that's actually worked really well so far. I think I've finally reached that kind of point where I'm happy with the way that a studio recording is sounding. And I feel like I have a lot of creative control over it.
Folk in general does kind of take on this it's either a very personal thing or you're telling stories that can be somewhat personal or autobiographical or biographical to other people and that kind of stuff. And then you're recording that and trying to convey as much emotion as possible through the recordings. Are you able to kind of convey everything that you're trying to convey in that setting?
Yeah. Yes and no. Like I think when I do, I don't actually have too much of a problem. I think probably because I studied guitar, I don't have too much of a problem like reproducing my guitar performance over and over and over again in exactly the same way as I kind of wrote it and as I intended it. Vocally, I'm really not a trained singer at all. And I'm a real pain in the studio when it comes to vocal takes. Like I will just want to keep doing vocal takes for hours if I didn't have kind of the restriction of the time. And I'm never satisfied with how a vocal take sounds. I think that's because you're really conveying, like the words are so personal, as you said, and like the kind of emotion of the song is all, to me at least, in the vocal mostly. So that's something I do struggle with. To be honest, I struggle with it at home as much as I struggle with it in the studio. It's just something that I feel like I can never quite get it right. But I think that's also something that I've gotten better at. And in a way, it's weird when you when you're doing a vocal take, you almost, I've found, at least personally, you have to listen to the words you're saying. It's so easy in the studio to become so mechanical and just be like, yes, I'm trying to get this perfect note. I'm trying not to breathe funny. I'm trying not to, croak a little bit in my voice or whatever. But in fact, I found that it's much more useful to just ignore the technicality and just think about the words and let the words have a bit of an emotional effect. And I found that you can actually hear that in the vocal when you're really thinking about the words you're saying.
But I remember when you wrote to me that letter, and you said you'd wait forever, and I really thought that you knew better than to say a thing like
Like, I don't have any ritual or like anything to prepare for studio recording. I do like obsessively play the pieces, make sure like I'm on top of everything. I'll usually have like a last minute freak out, like a few hours before I go into the studio, where I'll decide that a certain lyric is really shit, or I'll like decide that I don't like the way, I phrase something, and then I'll go back and quickly fix it. I actually find that's really useful though, because then I have something new to kind of keep the song fresh in my mind. To be honest, like, having done a little bit of studio recording now, like I've done, a number of tracks, I find that thinking like when it's fresh, like the song is fresh, it's newly written, it actually records much better than when it's an old song. I think I become too much of a perfectionist when it's a song that I've played live so many times. But also like, I write mostly just from my lived experience and, thoughts and feelings that I have. And when those thoughts and feelings are fresh is when I can most relate to the song. So I do actually, if I write something that I like now, I try to take it to the studio pretty quickly rather than waiting and letting it solidify too much.
Can you feel nostalgia for a life you've never lived? When you wake up every morning wondering if this is all there really.
I think I'm just a very like instant songwriter. Like I actually wish that I was a little bit more of someone who like perfected things and thought about them and kind of, wrote a chorus and then thought about it for, 25 days and went back and wrote the verse. I've got a lot of singer-songwriter friends who are like that. And I think they probably produce like technically better songs. Whereas I've always just been like, I have a feeling or a thought or an experience, and it's like I sit down at my guitar and it just comes out straight away. So it'll be, and then I'll go months without writing anything. But then it's kind of really urgent and really instant. And this sounds really lame, but then after I've played the song and like written the song, I want to play it all the time. And it's like all I really want to listen to. So I'll like listen to demos of that song just because that's how I kind of feel. And it also makes me feel a lot better. I guess it's kind of cathartic in that way. Like I'll write a song about something that's been bothering me or like something, an experience or whatever. And then that will kind of like make me feel better and also like kind of express, I guess, my emotions in a full way to myself and like help me understand how I feel about something or what I think about something. And then so I guess because I'm that kind of very instant person, bringing that to the studio kind of keeps the song having its energy. I think I'm trying to be, especially with like being in lockdown and not having that much to do, I'm trying to force myself to write and be a bit more technical about writing and be a bit more like, now I'm going to sit down and write a song. But to be perfectly honest, it's not working. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to write like that. I wish I could, but I can't.
You still ask me if I'll write a happy song next time. You still ask me if I'll write a happy song.
I always write the piece, like the guitar chords and the vocals. And I'll take the song to Marcella and we will like kind of just jam it just over and over and over again. And often I'll change what I play a little bit in that process, and she'll start to write bits. She writes all her own stuff, and same with Will, who's just started playing with us. It's all his own parts that he's written to go with the song that I've written. But I will like, if I hear something that I think is just amazing, I'll always say like, oh, hold on to that, like that's perfect. And I'll suggest all the way along. So, it is really collaborative. But I also like having their suggestions about what I play. Like, there's been some songs that I've written which are just so self-indulgent. Like, I'll be honest, like they'll be like 10-minute long whinges, and I'll play it to Marcella and she'll be like, and I'm like, is it a bit long? And she's like, yeah, it might be a bit long. And that'll really, it's good. I think it, like, you know, you get such a skewed idea of what you're writing and how good it is when you're just writing it for yourself and you're just playing it to yourself. And also, like, because I mentioned earlier that for me, it's also kind of cathartic. You know, sometimes you'll write something which was important for you as an individual to write, but it's not really important for anyone else to listen to. And I think it's important to recognize that. That's, you know, collaboration is just, to me, like the central pillar of everything that I do. I guess a criticism that I've had quite a lot from friends and family, and actually just people in the audience, is that my songs are pretty negative and pretty sad. And my lyrics, like, they're a little bit kind of depressing. And I really lean into that, if I'm honest. Like, all of my inspiration comes out of dissatisfaction, and out of kind of, I guess, to be quite broad about it, hatred of the kind of system that we're living in, and, you know, the kind of helplessness that you feel just kind of having to go to work and make money and, you know, in order to live. And, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of capitalism. I'll just leave it at that. I won't get too political. But I guess I kind of want to write songs about how that feels. And that's been a really big inspiration to me. And I ideally, like, you know, I think there's a lot of different things that music does. And one of the things which is pretty common, and I don't have a problem with this, but it's not really what I want to do. But, you know, there's a lot of music out there which is just designed to be nice to listen to, or, like, you know, you can go out to the club and forget your problems and listen to something that makes you feel better, or, you know, listen to it while you work out to kind of, you know, make you feel upbeat and motivated. And I really don't want to be an artist like that. Like, I really hope that my music can make people think and reflect and hopefully, you know, change the way they live, or, you know, at least feel a bit of dissatisfaction enough to try to take steps to build a life that they'd prefer to live, and a society that they'd prefer to live in. So that's a really big inspiration to me. So I want people to feel a bit uncomfortable when they listen to my music. Of course, it's fun to, like, play in a pub and have people sing along. And that is, you know, that's a bit of what we do, because we've got a couple of those, you know, high energy songs. But the lyrics, I do want people to kind of think about and relate to, but in a bit of an uncomfortable way.
Just where they fit, I try to look for the horizon, try to find the corner bit, but the sky changes with
I think this is a very Australian thing, is to have that, like, very kind of tongue-in-cheek, kind of very sarcastic approach in their lyrics.
Yeah.
So I can think of like quite a few singer-songwriters where there's that kind of, like, bit of that tongue-in-cheek approach to writing in the lyrics. Do you pick up on that and kind of play into that a bit?
Yeah, totally. I would say, like, a lot of the music that I like, you're right, I think it is a very Australian thing, but there's also a couple of US folk artists and kind of alternative folk artists that do it. I really like that kind of, you know, it's a little bit sarcastic. I like the way that, like, you know, mundane things are kind of, I guess, juxtaposed with, like, bigger, more abstract ideas. I think it's a really cool way to write. It really relates to me. And I think just because a lot of music that I listen to has that kind of lyrical style, I guess it's what I've picked up. But I do also really like I want to be an Australian artist in a really strong way. Like, I'm not interested in kind of just sounding like, you know, an artist that could be from any country. Like, I think Australia has a really exciting, especially alternative folk scene, actually. And I really want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I guess one thing to roll on from there is, where do you kind of see yourself in the world of the Australian scene in terms of like your influences from Australia, and then kind of putting yourself in that sound, in that world?
Yeah. Oh, look, that's hard. I'm always really bad at answering influence questions because I'll just like be listening to something completely unrelated to the way I write at the time. Um, Look, like I think Australia at the moment, like we've got a lot of really strong female singer-songwriters who kind of borrow on folk. Like they're not necessarily folk artists, but obviously, like the big ones at the moment, like Julia Jacqueline, love her, Courtney Barnett, Angie McMahon, those kind of acts. I listen to a lot of them. Obviously, like the dream is to be on that level. Not sure how realistic it is, but yeah, that's kind of like those. I think Australia is at the moment really rich for acts like that, which is really inspiring when you're kind of an artist who's just starting out.
To this old chair and my guitar, because last night was getting cold. All my friends had all gone home. I'm momentarily
This kind of scene that you're in terms of folk / country kind of thing, is you're able to take the music outside of just major cities. It's always great to play in Sydney, whatever. But you're also able to kind of take your music to the regions, which I find really interesting, because like I've never been in an act where I'm able to do that.
I love it. It's like one of my favorite things about touring. I think some of my best shows are in Goulburn, and I never would have thought that my best shows would be in Goulburn, or like, probably one of the highlights of last year was a show that we played in Thirroul at Frank's Wild Years in Thirroul. And, I love that. I didn't expect it, because if you think about it, like, yeah, I'm playing folk, but I'm also like, my lyrics are pretty progressive and left wing. Like I'm, like I have a whole song which is critical of Australia Day. And, I'm very like rude in my songs. Like I swear all the time. And so I did kind of worry about bringing it into a more like regional audience, where I'm not necessarily like, I'm not trying to say that people are more conservative or anything like that. But I guess the thing that concerned me was that because in smaller towns, you've got a more diverse range of people coming to the show to fill the venue. Like in Sydney, I'll be playing in a room full of people who are like 25 to 30, and they're all probably, very similar to me politically, very similar to me socioeconomically, because you've got enough people in the city to concentrate kind of groups in that way. Something that I love about playing in smaller places is that you can get such a wide range of people in one room, and you'll play on such a diverse lineup. Like, I will have literally just played after, someone who's, like singing covers with a backing track or something like that. And, I'd never normally do that in Sydney. And as a result of that, you look around the room and you have no idea. And you know that everyone in that room is going to have a different set of beliefs, a different lived experience, to yourself. But what's so rewarding is knowing that I can get up there and play these songs and people still relate to them. And some of the best audience experiences and the most engaged audiences that I've had have been in those places, which is really special.
for the sweet relief of that 8 a.m. alarm. I always knew that we were different.
I guess I'm a little bit of a control freak, so it's nice to be able to do everything for myself. And also because this is kind of, I guess my songs and, my face and kind of my name on things, I do want to be able to be in control of the way that that's presented and what type of shows I'm playing and, what people are kind of saying about me and like, you know, who's writing about my music and stuff like that. So it's really nice to have that creative control. It's really hard though, and it's really daunting as well, because the music industry is a pretty tough beast, and trying to approach that when you're all by yourself. And also, like, I don't have the skills, you know, of, you know, a whole team of people, you know, like I don't have graphic design skills. I don't even kind of know how to promote things and how to manage things in a, you know, proper technical way. So it's pretty hard. I think when you're comparing yourself to like a lot of bands who maybe do have some kind of, you know, management, or even just kind of a couple of people backing them in a way, it's easy to feel demoralized, because there's a lot of opportunities that probably are easier to achieve for those bands than when it's just literally one person doing it. But I also I think the DIY aspect of things, like, it's very community based. You meet a lot of really great people who just completely go out of their way for you and just, you know, give you opportunities and help you in any way they can. And I think the whole like independent music community, it's full of people who aren't motivated by money, because they're like, truthfully, there's not a lot of money in independent music. And I think having all of those people who are just uniting for something completely independent of profit and of, you know, commercial success, and they're all just like love music and want to make it happen and go out of their way. And, you know, often people are like spending heaps of money out of their own pocket to, you know, make events happen and pay sound and promote things. And even like, you know, simple things like poster printing, you know, that shit's pretty expensive. And people are doing that knowing that they're not going to make any money. And it's just such a rewarding community to be a part of.
And can you feel nostalgia for a life you've never lived? When you wake up.
I hate name changes. I wish I didn't have to do it, to be honest. I have, like, you know, I'm very conflicted about it. I was just going by H for a long time, but that just, it had so many issues. Like it wasn't an aesthetic thing. Like I still really like just going by H. I think it's a nice letter. It sounds nice. And it kind of visually like went with a lot of the stuff I was doing. I'm pretty minimal usually with a lot of the stuff. I probably less so now, but I was pretty minimal with a lot of the stuff I was releasing. So I think it really went well with that. Truthfully, the reason that I changed it was just because it was so hard to make work in any way. Like there were, you know, I would, especially once I moved to Sydney, I think because it's a bigger scene, it's just, you know, you can't tag it on Facebook, you can't tag it on Instagram, you can't search for it on Google. And it would cause like a lot of problems, like just with, you know, putting on events and like making me a host for events. You couldn't find it. So I also, you know, that was the main reason. Like I wish I had a cooler answer, but it was just such an impractical name to have that I had to just get rid of it. Hedy Blaazer, it's like, I think it's a little bit more me as well. And it's, I'm kind of happy as I've become more confident to have a solo project. I'm happy to have something that's a bit more connected to my name. So, you know, I have two surnames, but one of them is Blaazer. So I went with that one. And then my real name is Harriet. But no one's ever called me Harriet. Everyone's always called me Hetty, which is like a common abbreviation of Harriet, apparently. And then, because we're in Australia, everyone always calls me Hedy, and they like get rid of the T. So that was like, I thought I'd just lean into that. I also had a teacher who used to call me Hedy Lamar, like after the famous, was she? I think she was an actress. I don't really know. And she was also an inventor, right? I think she's a pretty interesting person. But so that kind of came out, and like people have always just called me Hedy. So I just decided to lean into it and go with that.
I'll write a happy song next time. You still ask me.
Throwing back to the arranging topic, one thing I've noticed is that you've kind of got this dichotomy between the acoustic guitar and the electric guitar. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. Look, I'd always played electric because of like jazz for pretty much a lot of my education. Basically, when I was at VCA, the expectation was that you're like practicing, 6 to 8 hours a day. And I got carpal tunnel in my wrist from playing so much. Basically, I've just got like a skinny wrist or something, and the nerves, like as I got stronger, the nerves were getting like pushed in to the bone. So I had to really like the bad, like you have to rest it and you have to wear like a brace when you sleep and everything on your wrists. And I got on top of it. I didn't need surgery or anything. But it really, like I had to make some pretty big changes to the way that I was playing guitar. And so, I had to buy like a really light guitar that was easier to play. I was always like a really staunch Gibson girl, and I had to move to Fender because they're much lighter and easier on the neck. And I had to move away from playing acoustic because it's just much harder to play. So I was mostly just playing electric all the time. And I started Hedy Blaazer playing electric all the time. And then thanks to a really great guitar teacher that I had, he basically recommended to me that I started playing a smaller bodied acoustic. So I got a Taylor GS Mini, which has really just changed my life because it's meant that I'm able to play acoustic without having any wrist issues. Just the smaller neck is so much easier with my small hands. And so I've just started doing that and fell back in love with acoustic, but like after I'd already finished uni and after I'd started Hedy Blaazer. So now I'm kind of in this awkward phase where I write everything on acoustic just because it's such an easy instrument to pick up. But I still tend to preference performing on electric just because you feel much more, I don't know, there's just something about, I think, just like having an amp on stage instead of just relying on like a DI that just feels much more familiar to me. So at this stage, the kind of division is that I'm writing and rehearsing on acoustic, and every time I get on a stage, I play electric. But as I play more and more and more acoustic guitar, I'm getting more familiar with that. So I've actually just recently done this thing where I got a new Fender and I've restrung it so that it's really similar to an acoustic guitar. So it's got like a wound G and super heavy strings. And that's been really interesting to play, but it is still something that I'm navigating, and I can't quite decide where I sit with acoustic electric divide.
Twice now, so maybe I'm a fool and I wrote a song like this before.
I remember this teacher, because I was pretty cut. Before I had all this wrist stuff happen, I was pretty sold on the whole conservatorium model of study and the real, you play 8 hours a day, you become really, really a really good technical player, you get really good chops. And I kind of reevaluated that a lot after the wrist thing. And I had this amazing guitar teacher, folk guitar teacher, who said to me, with limitation comes style. And that really spoke to me. And so now, instead of trying to kind of be anything else, I'm just doing what I can do and embracing what I can do. And it's actually led me to have a lot more of my own unique kind of sound and style. So I'm really grateful for that.
A shape made for right angles. It doesn't fit in something round. I guess it's better if we...
Oh, look, I've been pretty down, obviously, in lockdown. It gets pretty tiring after a while. So I've been trying to listen to a lot of really upbeat music. So a lot of I'm going more into rather than folk, which tends to be pretty existential, I'm going more into my kind of hip hop. Not that it's necessarily upbeat, but kind of like, rhythmically upbeat, even if the lyrics are, also quite existential. But yeah, I've been listening to a lot of Raveena, kind of neo soul stuff. So good. You just can't help but feel happy when you listen to Raveena. And I also just like really admire all of the like arrangements in her music. I actually got super into her tiny desk. I just saw that someone had like shared it on Facebook and I'd never heard of her before. So now I'm like obsessed. And then I've also been listening to Rhapsody a lot. I was chatting with one of my former bandmates in Beneath Bonetta about like, hip hop and like who's the best kind of rapper in the scene at the moment. And he really, really, really backed Rhapsody. And I'd never heard of her. And I had a listen and I was just blown away. So I've been listening to the album Layla's Wisdom on repeat.
Honestly, why do you even talk to me? I can see your eyes drift around. You're trying to find a better place to be. And honestly, I'm bored, 'cause we've both been here before. And I don't wanna be another fucked up thing that you adore.
What you just heard was the track Happy Song, the latest single released by Hedy Blaazer. Ben Harp.
Hello.
Hi.
What's up?
You tell me.
I guess I'll give you my snappy little thoughts about the interview.
Your little blurb.
Well, I thought it was a great interview, and it was great to talk to Hedy about her practice, her music. I said this to her during the interview, but I don't think it's in the cut down. But I said I actually kind of really personally relate to a lot of her music.
Yeah.
A lot of her music is kind of thematically around like, and she did talk about this in the interview, about being like, uncomfortable with the world today and like the whole process of,
The way things are.
being a 9-to-5er and all that kind of stuff. So I really like her song. It's called, I'm blanking here. It's called Already Gone. And there's a line in it about the person, if it's Hedy or if it's, this kind of ethereal person.
The person.
About them kind of like going postal. And I was like, I can relate to that. So yeah, I thought it was a great interview, and I'm glad that Hedy could join us for the interview. And I want to say thanks to her, and thank you for listening. Since you are listening, you should also maybe hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts or follow on Spotify and leave a review. You can also find us on YouTube. You could give the YouTube channel a subscribe if you are so inclined. But that's it from us. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye. Cassette Connection is recorded and produced by Ben Harp and Alex Ferrugia. For more information, head to our website, cassetteconnection.com.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Cassette Connection. And if you would like to be featured or just want to get in touch, our email is contact@cassetteconnection.com.